I used to work at a gas station about 20 years ago. I worked there for nearly a year, mostly on the overnight shift. The gas station was small and out in the countryside. The little convenience store was open 24/7, but we rarely had customers at night. Most nights were quiet and uneventful, but one night changed everything for me. It was a Friday night, around 11 p.m. I hadn't had any customers for quite some time. From my spot behind the counter, I could see the 4 gas pumps outside. They sat empty, and even the road next to the gas station was quiet. Then, I saw headlights in the distance. Soon, a white SUV pulled into the station and stopped at one of the pumps. The way it was parked, the back window was facing me, and I could see the entire back of the vehicle. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just another customer filling their tank. But after a few minutes, I noticed that no one had gotten out of the vehicle. Normally, someone would have started pumping gas or walked into the store by now, but whoever was in the SUV stayed inside. It was a bit strange, but I didn't worry too much. As the minutes passed, I kept glancing at the SUV. It had been about 30 minutes, and still, no one had gotten out. Another car came and got gas at a different pump and then left, but the SUV remained. I started to feel uneasy. I got up to get a drink and returned to my spot behind the counter. That's when I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. Through the tinted back window, I saw a man staring at me. His face was pressed up against the glass, his eyes wide and unblinking. I didn't know if he had been the driver or if someone else was in the car with him. But the way he stared at me was unsettling. He didn't move, just kept staring. I looked away, trying to distract myself with other tasks, but every time I looked back, he was still there, staring at me. An hour passed, and the man was still there, staring. I couldn't understand why. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I got up and walked to the door. I stepped outside and stood on the walkway in front of the store. The man was about 50 feet away, still staring at me from the back of the SUV. I took a few steps towards the gas pumps. Suddenly, the man moved. He quickly ducked down, and I lost sight of him. I saw some movement inside the SUV, but I couldn't tell what was happening. Then, the SUV started moving in reverse, straight towards me. I quickly stepped back onto the walkway, pressing myself against the building. The SUV kept reversing, the tires screeching. It stopped just a few feet away from me. I thought he was going to run me over or crash into the building, but he didn't. Instead, he suddenly sped off, tires screeching again, and disappeared down the road. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I went back inside, hoping he wouldn't return. The rest of the night was quiet, but I was on edge the whole time. I called my manager and explained what happened. He told me to call the police if the SUV came back. About an hour later, I saw the headlights again. The same white SUV pulled into the station. My heart pounded as it parked at the same pump. This time, I didn't wait. I locked the door and called the police. While on the phone, I watched the SUV through the window. The man was back, but now he was out of the vehicle, standing by the pump, staring at the store. The operator assured me that officers were on their way. The man started walking towards the store. He reached the door and tried to open it, but it was locked. He began banging on the glass, shouting something I couldn't hear through the thick glass. I backed away, trembling. The banging got louder, more frantic. Suddenly, he stopped. He turned around, walked back to the SUV, and got inside. I watched as he sat there, the vehicle idling. A few minutes later, the police arrived. They approached the SUV cautiously. The man didn't move. One of the officers knocked on the window, and the man finally rolled it down. There was a brief exchange before the officers asked him to step out of the vehicle. As he got out, the officers searched him in the SUV. I watched from the store, my heart still racing. After a few tense minutes, they handcuffed him and led him to the police car. One of the officers came into the store to talk to me. He explained that the man had been acting strangely but hadn't committed any crime until he tried to break into the store. They found some odd items in his car, a collection of old keys, a taser, and several notebooks filled with ramblings about people watching him. The officer said they would take him in for a mental health evaluation. I felt a little better knowing he was in custody, but the experience left me shaken. I finished my shift, constantly looking over my shoulder. The next morning, I put in my resignation. I couldn't handle another night like that. I never found out what happened to the man or why he fixated on me in the gas station. But to this day, I can't shake the image of his wide, unblinking eyes staring at me through the window. Liking these true tales of a tale? Then check this. Most of you guys didn't subscribe to the channel. Please do it now, or maybe you will face the same situation as she faced. Working the graveyard shift at a gas station isn't exciting, but I needed the money. The station was small, on the edge of town, surrounded by trees. At night, it felt like the middle of nowhere. The only light came from the neon sign and a few flickering streetlights. It was so quiet that every little sound seemed louder. I had been working there for about 6 months. The job was simple: sell gas, snacks, and drinks to the occasional customer, clean the store, and keep an eye on things. Most nights were uneventful, but sometimes I got a weird feeling, like someone was watching me. I tried to brush it off as my imagination. One Wednesday, things were slow. The clock had just struck midnight, and I was restocking shelves. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up, expecting a customer, but no one was there. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe the wind had moved the door. A few minutes later, I heard a noise outside. I went to the window and saw a man standing by the gas pumps. He was just standing there, staring at the station. It was unsettling. He didn't move for what felt like forever. Finally, he walked towards the door. As he entered, I felt a chill run down my spine. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. His clothes were old and dirty, like he had been traveling for days. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking around the store. Then he approached the counter. "Can I use the bathroom?" he asked in a low, raspy voice. I hesitated. Our bathroom was for employees only, and I didn't feel comfortable letting him in. "Sorry, it's out of order," I lied. He didn't seem to believe me. He just kept staring, his eyes boring into mine. "Please, I need to use the bathroom," he insisted. I shook my head. "I'm sorry, but it's not working. There's a public restroom down the road." He didn't argue and instead turned and walked out the door. I watched him as he got into his car, an old beat-up sedan, and just sat there staring at the station. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He was still there, watching. Hours passed, and he didn't move. I called my boss, explained the situation, and he told me to keep the doors locked and call the police if anything happened. I felt a little better, but the man's presence was unnerving. Around 3 a.m., I heard a noise outside. It sounded like footsteps, but when I looked out the window, I didn't see anyone. I went back to my work, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the station into darkness. My heart raced. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the fuse box. Everything seemed fine, but the power wouldn't come back on. I heard another noise, this time from the back of the store. I shined my flashlight in that direction, but there was nothing there. I decided to call the police. As I reached for the phone, I saw the man again, standing by the back door, staring at me through the glass. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. The operator answered, and I explained what was happening. They assured me that an officer was on the way. I stayed on the line, my eyes never leaving the man. He didn't move, just kept staring. Finally, I saw the flashing lights of a police car. The officer arrived and shined his flashlight around the station. The man was gone. The officer checked the area but found nothing. He took my statement and told me to call if anything else happened. The power came back on shortly after he left, but I couldn't shake the fear that lingered. The rest of the night was quiet, but I couldn't relax. Every sound made me jump, and I kept looking out the window, expecting to see the man. When my shift finally ended, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I told my boss what had happened, and he promised to review the security footage and contact the police again. For the next few nights, I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he? What did he want? Why did he just stand there watching? A few weeks later, I saw a news report about a man who had been found dead in his car not far from the gas station. The police said he had been there for days, possibly even weeks. They didn't know how he died, but the description matched the man who had come to the station that night. The thought that he had been watching me even after his death sent chills down my spine. I quit the job not long after that. The experience was too much for me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in my own home. Sometimes, late at night, I still get that feeling. I look out the window, half expecting to see him standing there, staring, waiting. Now guys, what do you think about it? Please let me know in the comments, and please like the video to motivate us. Working at a quiet gas station in our small town was a job I enjoyed. I liked the night shift because it was calm and peaceful. Most nights, not many people stopped by, and I liked that I had time to think, read a book, or just enjoy the silence. The gas station was on the edge of town, and the nights were usually very quiet. One night, it was particularly still. The air was cool, and the stars were shining brightly in the dark sky. I was inside the small store, sitting behind the counter. The only sounds were the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft buzz of the overhead lights. It was a perfect night. Hours passed without any customers. I checked my watch. It was almost 2 a.m. I got up to stretch my legs and decided to do a quick check around the store. I walked through the aisles, making sure everything was in order. The chips were neatly stacked, the drinks were chilled, and the candy bars were lined up perfectly. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of pride in my work. I walked towards the restroom to make sure it was clean. No one had used it in hours, so it should be fine. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The restroom door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it earlier. My heart started to beat a little faster, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had just forgotten to close it properly. I pushed the door open and peeked inside. The restroom was empty, just as I expected. I let out a sigh of relief and closed the door, making sure it clicked shut this time. I went back to my spot behind the counter and sat down, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Minutes turned into hours, and soon it was almost 3 a.m. I was reading a book, getting lost in the story, when suddenly I heard a noise. It was a soft thud, as if something had fallen. I looked up, my heart racing again. I listened carefully, but the store was silent once more. I tried to go back to my book, but I couldn't focus. I kept glancing up, feeling like someone was watching me. Then it happened. The restroom door burst open, and a person stumbled out. They were sweaty and looked panicked. Their eyes were wide with fear, and they were breathing heavily. My heart almost stopped. I had been alone for hours. How could someone be in the restroom? The person didn't say a word. They just dashed past me and ran out of the store. I was too shocked to move or say anything. I just watched them disappear into the night. I sat there, stunned and confused. Who was that? How did they get in? And why were they so scared? I got up and walked towards the restroom again, my legs feeling shaky. I pushed the door open, half expecting to find something terrible inside. But the restroom was empty, just as before. There was no sign that anyone had been there. No belongings, no mess, nothing. I checked the security cameras, hoping they would give me some answers. I rewound the footage and watched it carefully. I saw myself walking towards the restroom earlier, then sitting behind the counter. I fast-forwarded and then I saw it. The restroom door slowly opened, and the person stepped out. But before that moment, there was no one. The camera showed an empty restroom the whole time. It didn't make sense. I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't explain what I had just seen. I called my manager, even though it was late. I needed to tell someone. When he answered, I tried to explain what had happened, but he sounded half asleep and told me to lock up and go home. He said we would look at the footage together in the morning. I did as he said. I locked the store and walked to my car, feeling the weight of the night on my shoulders. The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking about the person who had burst out of the restroom. Their fear was real, and it scared me too. The next day, my manager and I watched the footage together. He was just as puzzled as I was. We couldn't find any explanation. There were no other entries on the cameras, no signs of forced entry, nothing. It was as if the person had appeared out of nowhere. We checked the restroom thoroughly. There were no hidden doors, no secret passages. It was just a regular restroom. My manager tried to reassure me, saying it was probably a prank or maybe I was just tired and imagining things. But I knew what I saw. The fear in that person's eyes was real. I continued working at the gas station, but the nights were never the same. Every creak and every noise made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that didn't belong in our world. The calmness I once loved about the night shift was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of dread. To this day, I still think about that night. I wonder who that person was and what they were running from. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm all alone, I feel a cold breeze and hear a faint thud. And I remember the fear in their eyes. I work the graveyard shift at a gas station. It's a lonely job, especially at night. The gas station is on a quiet highway, far from the town. At night, it feels like I'm the only person in the world. The gas station is old. The lights flicker sometimes, and the paint is peeling off the walls. There is a small store inside where we sell snacks, drinks, and basic supplies. My job is to keep the place clean and help the few customers who come in. One night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting behind the counter, trying to stay awake. The night was very quiet, and I could hear the crickets outside. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and I heard a strange noise from outside. It sounded like someone whispering. I went to the window and looked out. The parking lot was empty, and there were no cars at the pumps. I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to shake it off and went back to my seat. After a few minutes, I heard the noise again. It was louder this time, like someone was right outside the door. I got up and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold night air hit my face. "Hello?" I called out. There was no answer. I looked around but saw nothing. I went back inside, feeling uneasy. I locked the door behind me. As I sat back down, the phone on the counter rang. It was strange because the phone rarely rang at night. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard the whispering again. It was faint, but I could hear it clearly through the phone. I hung up quickly, my hands shaking. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was just a prank, I thought. But deep down, I knew something was not right. I decided to keep busy to take my mind off it. I started stocking the shelves and cleaning the floor. As I was working, I heard the bell above the door ring. Someone had come in, but no one was there. The door was closed. My heart raced as I walked to the door and looked outside. The parking lot was still empty. I checked the security cameras. They showed the parking lot and the inside of the store. I rewound the footage to see if I had missed something. The cameras showed the door opening by itself. No one was there. The door opened, and the bell rang, but there was no one on the screen. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I decided to call my manager. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang and rang, but there was no answer. I left a message, telling him what had happened. I hoped he would call me back soon. As I hung up, I noticed something on the counter. It was a small, old-looking book. I had not seen it there before. I picked it up and opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, and the writing was hard to read. It looked like it was written in a different language. I felt a strange compulsion to read the book. As I turned the pages, I felt a cold breeze blow through the store, even though the door was closed. The lights flickered again, and I heard the whispering, louder this time. It sounded like it was coming from all around me. I dropped the book and stepped back. The whispering continued, growing louder and more intense. I covered my ears, but it did not help. The voices were inside my head. They were saying things I could not understand, but I felt their meaning. They were angry. I ran to the door and tried to open it, but it would not budge. The whispering was deafening now. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I banged on the door, screaming for help, but no one could hear me. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The store was silent. The lights stopped flickering, and the cold breeze was gone. I turned around and saw the book lying on the floor. It was open to a page with a strange symbol drawn on it. I picked it up and looked at the symbol. It was a circle with a star inside it and strange writing around the edges. As I stared at it, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a feeling of peace. I closed the book and put it back on the counter. I did not know what had just happened, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and went to the door. This time it opened easily. I got in my car and drove away from the gas station as fast as I could. I did not look back. When I got home, I called my manager again and told him I was quitting. I could not go back to that place. I never found out what caused the strange events that night. I do not want to know. All I know is that I will never work the graveyard shift at a gas station again. And, thank you, guys, because you're still watching. I hope you did subscribe to the channel, but that's not the end of the video. Click on the left side to watch some other interesting video, or else you can go with the right one.